Payment cards are, of course, a very important part of card payments. When we talk about card payments, we look at the payment card as being the mechanism that is used to provide our details as a customer through the merchant to allow for the payment to be processed. The payment card themselves is specified in various ISO standards that we have referenced in the notes to this lecture. But they specify the physical size, the type of data that is stored, how that data is stored, and so on. This can change, however. We do have different types of payment form factors that are used. So, for example, although a payment card is a very specific shape and size, you might see payment cards that in the shape of stickers, key fobs, these sorts of things, to allow for different modalities, different ways of making payments. Usually they will, when they're in these different shapes, use contactless mechanisms because the physical mechanisms, such as the magnetic stripe, such as the chip, won't necessarily be able to be used when the card has a different shape. This is very important when we talk about mobile payments. Obviously, a mobile phone is not the shape of a payment card. It doesn't meet the ISO specification, it doesn't have a chip on it that is exposed, it doesn't have a magnetic stripe on the back. So when we talk about mobile payments, we're almost always going to be talking about either contactless payments or the use of optical mechanisms as a transfer process, so QR codes. And we'll be talking about both of these things later on. However, the type of data and, in fact, the way that data is processed is generally quite similar, regardless of the form factor of the card, how the data is stored, how it is transferred through to the merchant. We look at a traditional payment card, the type of standard card we're used to, the normal form factor. You'll see various items, and everybody's used to seeing these. You'll see, for example, a number printed on the front of the card. This number is referred to as the primary account number, the PAN. And this is very important to card payments, and we'll be talking about the PAN extensively throughout this lecture series. There's also other things that you might notice on this particular type of card. You might see, for example, an expiry date. There might even be an issue date. You might see the customer name printed on the front of the card. You might see, for example, a chip if it is an EMV card, a contact EMV card. On the back of the card, you might see the magnetic stripe, which stores and is used for the traditional magnetic stripe type processing. You might see a signature panel, and then you might see some sort of code off to the side called a security code or a CVV2 or a CVC2 that is generally used primarily in online payments. This security code may in fact sometimes be on the front of the card, depending on the type of card brand that you're using. So the magnetic stripe card is the type of card that most of us are very used to using. This magnetic stripe stores data, once again according to a specific ISO format, and contains up to 3 tracks. 2 of these tracks are used for the type of card payments that we're used to, track 1 and track 2. Track 3 is generally used for different things, loyalty schemes, sometimes domestic payment processes, but not generally for these international payment processes that we're going to be talking about through this lecture series. When you take your magnetic card and you pull it through a magnetic card reader, then the data on that magnetic stripe, one of those tracks or perhaps both of those tracks, is read by particular electronics in that device to extract the information, the primary account number, the PAN, plus other data, to facilitate and allow for routing of that transaction. When we look at track 1 is a superset of all the data that is contained on a magnetic stripe for international payment processing. It contains the PAN, the primary account number. It also contains the customer name, as well as additional data such as, for example, the expiry date. It contains a piece of data known as the service code, which identifies the type of card it is. Is it magnetic stripe only? Is it magnetic stripe with chip, and so on? And then there is what's called discretionary data that isn't defined, and it's up to the card issuer to define what they put in there. Track 2 has a subset of that data. It still contains the PAN because the PAN is the most important item to allow for the processing of the transaction, but it also has other data, such as the service code, the expiry date, as well as discretionary data as well.